learning disabilities and communication problems. In that process, I've cultivated compassion, empathy, the ability to listen, and my whole adult career focused on helping people communicate. So I believe that's what fuels my writing. That's how I entered, and that's what propels me. Not that I'm listening to someone's story and copying, what I write into a play. It's more the emotional journey of triumph, of suffering, of complications, of things that are supposed to be love but aren't love, things that are supposed to be hate but they're deeper than that. They're hiding pain and hurt. So being in this, affected by this kind of environment fuels me to keep writing. And I have many more to write, and I'm looking forward to them getting into literature.
It's part of your mission. I mean, as a professional within your career, you're an
Yes.
effective listener,
Yes.
and then translator and communicator of what you're hearing, and you're putting it out there in a very creative way through your plays.
Thank you.
And it's really making the audience, even though it's raw, as Toni mentioned, and it's difficult, the creativity behind it is what makes it accessible and bearable for the audience.
Bearable.
Thank you.
Bearable.
Yes, to
Yes.
sit through
Mm-hmm.
and understand,
you.
and then take, whether they identify, whether they learn, whether to take from it, and then create dialogue and thought, which is where we move towards change. So it's an amazing process
Thank you.
of healing, I would
Thank you.
say.
I also write about objects who are personified as people. So I've written about a banana who has a conversation with the banana peel. I've written about a salt and pepper shaker that are getting divorced. So it's some of my favorite kind of work talking about objects, because it allows us to step outside of ourselves and look at it.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking that it takes us away from the human, so it sort of makes it less
buffer?
raw.
A
It is
buffer.
a buffer. It's not as, you don't feel it as much, but you get now an opportunity to look at it
Yes.
more
Yes.
objectively.
Yes.
It's not human, right?
not
So that's not
human.
me.
It's not
and there's
human.
no reflection of me in
the
that salt and
message
pepper
gets
shaker.
across.
Yes. But I can use it to get positive thinking about certain subjects. So, for example, there's a play called BS, which is about a bagel and a scone sitting in a cafe, priming themselves up, getting ready to be bought. I mean, in the end, the eaters come in and only want black coffee, so they're disappointed.
Right.
However, in the meantime, the bagel talks about he's so holy and beautiful and pale complexion. There's a red velvet cake, and they fall in love with the red velvet cake, and she gets eaten by the barista. They quarrel about whether the cornbread should be allowed in the cafe, because they're gonna bring mini bagels, low
Sounds
carb
like girls' night out.
So I talk about gentrification and privilege through this
Parallels.
this parallel universe of a bagel and a scone that talk together.
Now, one thing that you revealed in a conversation we had prior to here was that you had gone to Montreal.
Yes.
Share that story with us, the Montreal story.
All right. So I knew something in my life had to change. It's not that there was something that was particularly wrong, but I just felt there needed to be a change. And to make a long story short, I called a convent in Montreal. I got on the phone. I don't speak French. They said, wait. There's one nun here who speaks English. And so she got on the phone, and she told me she was waiting for me to call. I got in my truck. I drove to Montreal. I took a vow of silence for 30 more days. They gave me an apartment next to the convent. They said, the only thing you have to do is eat with us.
Wow.
And so
Amazing.
while I was there, I realized I was supposed to write. And I started writing there, and here I am.
How does your muse come to you?
It can come from anything. It can come from a color, from an object, a word. Somebody says to me, I saw a young lady with a large scar on her arm, and I was, feeling such pain for this, what happened to you, and are you better? And she told me the story, but what stuck with me is she said, my mother told me sometimes scars are there to help you remember. And so I wrote a play called Scars to Remember. So I never know where it's going to come from, but I try so hard to fight it, which is sometimes
What do you
challenging.
mean?
I have a PhD in the sciences, so I have to.
Cerebral.
Right. So I have to. It's okay. And I'm a Gemini, so it's fine. So that's this, and I have to do writing in that field, and then the other writing, I start with the scribble and just let it go and then let the play
It's your
come.
intuition is what lets you go.
Yes. I want to speak, though, about trauma. And because so much of your work seems to be like a focus, for lack of a better word. What do you see as trauma?
I see trauma as an event or a series of events that changes a person psychically, changes their soul, changes their approach to the world, maybe out of hurt or helplessness or something they're unable to overcome on their own. Now that's not a therapeutic explanation. That's how I feel about it and how I've observed it.
Healing from it. How does that occur?
With trauma, it's not so much that someone being hit by a train watching it is it's traumatic for the person that's hit by a train, but different people that are looking at it may respond in different ways depending on their ability to cope.
Right? To cope.
So to cope, yeah.
I always, the phrase that I always think of is that hurt people hurt people. So that sense of when you've been hurt.
When you've been hurt.
And if you haven't been able to heal and through that process, then you may inflict. And that's why I thought it was interesting when you were talking about victims and perpetrators together, thinking
Yes.
that there might be the victim side of the perpetrator, that ability to now see, wow, this is where that came from because of their own experience of trauma in the past.
Yes.
Maria, I haven't heard from you. What are you thinking? I'm watching your face, your facial expressions, but I want to hear
Yeah,
it.
no, so it's a lot, and it's a lot because as I hear you talking, I'm saying, okay, yeah, I know specific people who've been in those positions, and so it's bringing up right those memories and those traumas, which are kind of
Hard to deal with.
yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
they are, and one of the things though, which isn't so difficult, when I wanted to ask you, when you were saying that you have like to compartmentalize your
Yes.
writing, right? You have
Yes.
this and then you have this. How easy is it for you to kind of integrate them? Or is it easy for you to integrate the two? And because I know we compartmentalize, but at the
Yes.
same time, it's all of who you are, right? And you can't really segment out
Right.
some of who you are because it's who you are and it's how you are. And so do you blend the two? Do you have any kind of a process or synthesization, or do you just go and it comes out of
I let it
mosh of
happen.
both?
I let it happen, and I only go back and structure and format it at the end when I want it to be fully communicated to the people who read it or see it. But there are some intersections. So, for example, I wrote a play called Scat about an autistic adult who, instead of using words, was able to scat music. And that's because his father was a jazz musician and he brought his autistic son backstage to hear the music and experience the music. So the son could play sax, but he would only play it for his mother. And so as the play takes place and social services, she's trying to get support for her son who is a genius musician, and no one believes it or believes it's a skill. They just see the autism. So my training as a therapist helped me to write
So it's all informing, each thing
authentic-
informs the other.
Yes, exactly.
One thing, though, I
Authentic
wanted
dialogue.
to do before we closed, I found that your definition of abuse was a broad one. Would you share that? You talked about words, wherever you,
I see.
the way that you spoke about it in terms of not feeling safe, that,
Right.
yeah.
Right. So I think it goes along with my belief in what a weapon is. You know? So keeping that in mind. So there are different forms of abuse. Anytime that you're using something, an object, even a word for harm.
I thought that was real interesting. I thought,
You know,
yeah.
words have power. Words can be healing. Words can be medicine. They can also be destructive. They can intimidate. They can coerce. And when words are used in that way, whether it's a single word or it's a phrase, it can hurt people. It can compel them not to go on to feel helpless. And I think we see quite a bit of that.
So we're about to close, so why don't you talk a little bit about your book, Articulation?
Thank you.
Okay.
This book, I was very excited about this book.
Thank you.
Which is my first collection of plays. I've had single plays produced with other people, but I always felt that I was, my work was drowned out. So this gave me an opportunity to have everything in one place. This is 10, so it's just a taste because I have a few hundred more I want to push out into the world. So I hope you'll read it and enjoy it. It has beautiful handwritten drawings, like Veronica Bunny. You'll see she has human hands, and it's fun.
And one thing I wanted to comment on before we end, Ceci and I also did a podcast together, and it was with men, and it's really interesting the direction that the conversation took. Because the one thing one gentleman said was, because, I got really hung up on the actual physical abuse, that striking a woman with shoes. And he said, but you have to understand, everything he does, he's getting something out of it.
Yes.
I've never really thought of it that way, that when you harm someone or whatever it is that you're doing, you are getting something out of it. So I just found that kind of interesting as well. Not that I want to end on a negative note. Not that I want to end it on a negative note, but at the end of the day, her work, your art, it really helps people, like you said, Mickey, and you, Maria, alluded to, see themselves in a non-threatening, non-confrontational way because you're spectating. So I think that your work is really important, and I'm just so happy that you joined us on this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. So thank you, Dr. Cesi Davidson. And we're fans. We are fans.
Absolutely.
Thank you, panelistas. And that's all the time we have for this episode of Brooklyn Savvy. We'll see you next time on Brooklyn Savvy.